we'd have. So thank you all for squeezing in. We knew Edith was a popular lady, but this is really fabulous. So thank you all for coming. For those of you who don't know, my name is Monique Shore. I work here at the Public Library, and I head up our digital archive project, the Poweshiek History Preservation Project, that is a collaboration between the Public Library and the college libraries. And a couple months ago, Dan here, Dan Kaiser, who's a retired Grinnell College professor, he, in his retirement, decided to become a Grinnell history buff. So he had been doing some research on the Renfrow family. The Renfrows were in Grinnell in the early 1900s, and Edith is the fifth of 6 children who was raised here in Grinnell. And he discovered, well, I guess it was known by folks at the college, that she was still alive and well in Chicago. Well, in the midst of his research, he found that we really had very few pictures of the family. And they were a pretty notable family. So he had the brainstorm to say, I wonder if we could connect with the college alumni office and see if we could take the History Project scanning equipment down over to Chicago to scan some of her pictures. So that all worked out, and we had a wonderful gentleman from the college who went and visited with Edith and Alice and scanned about 20 pictures. And when he came back, he said, oh, by the way, Edith is planning to come to Grinnell next month. So we thought, well, really, maybe we could set something up. So that is how this visit came about. We're very, very excited. Obviously, you all are very excited. I did want to note, I'm very glad to have the high school class here. I know those were hot seats and it was hard to reserve those, but I want you to note for you high school students, next time you walk by the Hall of Fame wall, by the auditorium, there's one of Edith's sister, Helen Renfrow, is on that Hall of Fame wall. So this is a pretty significant family in Grinnell's history. Edith herself was the first African-American female to graduate from the college and is just a remarkable woman in her own right. So let's give a warm welcome to Edith.
Thank you. I know what it's like to be with a rock star now. I told Edith when I saw her out there, she's dressed up so fine and so on, I felt like going home and putting on a tuxedo. But I don't think you're going to be looking in my direction anyway. I want you to know how pleased we are that you are here, and I want to thank Carla Selby, I think one of the first originators of the idea for having this meeting, and Monique, who's done a ton of work getting the advertising out, organizing it. It's been just terrific. And the Drake Library that Marilyn Kennett directs and so on has been so receptive to all this. We're so appreciative of it all. Now let me just lay out what we're planning to do quickly, and then I'm going to ask a few questions. But the idea is that you also may have questions. Now look around you, we're not going to be able to answer everyone's questions. But some of you, many of you perhaps, have gotten a little green slip that was passed out when you were entering. If you have a question, you're going to be able to write it down. Don't use both sides, please. Just try to condense it onto one side, and we'll collect them partway through the session and see if we can't answer at least some of those as well. But to get that underway, I'm going to ask a few questions. You know already that Edith this is one of the few occasions when I can say, I'm speaking to someone who's older than I am. But she doesn't act like it, I have to say. But still, I'm going to glory in the moment anyway. I'm going to ask a few questions. We have about 100 years worth of living to go through. We're going to concentrate mainly on things that happened in Grinnell. Right? Edith was born in 1914 in Grinnell, went through the Grinnell schools, and went through Grinnell College. When she left town in 1937 to work in Chicago, and so pretty much of her time has been in Chicago since then, I think. So we're going to try to concentrate mainly on that period up to 1937. Doesn't mean that you have to restrict your questions to that, but that's where we're going to go from here, okay? Please don't anyone say the word fire. Okay? We're kind of packed out here, and so let's try to go. I already warned Edith that the first thing I wanted to ask her, it seemed like it was reasonable to begin at the beginning. So I'm going to ask her, what's your earliest memory?
My earliest memory was when I was 3 years old. We moved from 511 2nd Avenue to 411 1st Avenue. And there was a telephone on the wall. And I don't know whether you all remember, but there was big wooden thing up on the wall. And everybody's telephone was on your line. And oh, that was the most exciting thing. And we did not have electric until we moved to 411. And so those are my earliest memories of Grinnell.
Pretty good. Does anybody remember what a telephone on the wall was? Well, let me ask you this. One of the photos, Edith, that we acquired, I think this is one that Vince scanned in Chicago, shows your mother and father in the living room. Your father, I think, is reading the newspaper, and your mother seems to be crocheting or knitting, something like that. I see in the back, behind it, a piano. I'm wondering, what sort of reading and activities happen in your household? You, I know, played the piano. Did anybody else in your household play or play another instrument? Or?
I don't know whether you know, but back in those days, every child was supposed to play something. So my sisters learned to play the piano, even if we couldn't play. My brother took violin lessons. Did you ever hear somebody screech on a violin? That was what we had to listen to. Because he was a year and a half younger than I, and he took violin.
I had a sister that played violin. Believe me, I know what you're talking about. I'm not sure that my ears have recovered yet. What about, was there a regular newspaper? Did your dad read?
We did not. We were poor as Bill Church. We did not have a newspaper. Every Sunday, my father bought the Chicago Tribune. That was his, and that was probably what he was looking at in it. And my mother was either chatting, doing embroidery, or sewing. She always was busy when she sat down. And the piano was a main thing in our living room because at that time, in those years, they had 12 black men who were here on Rosenwald Scholarship. And they came to our house every Sunday to have jello and sing with my sister playing the piano.
Sounds like fun, except maybe for the jello. Yes, actually, these were the students at the college, right? The Rosenwald,
Rosenwald
scholars. And some of you may know that one of the gravestones out at Hazelwood Cemetery is the gravestone for one of these students, Mona Chi, who was here and fell very seriously ill while he was a student here and never recovered. And he was a student from Liberia?
Yeah, from
Liberia, and never recovered, and his remains are now out at Hazelwood Cemetery. So there's a way in which that body of students, these were male students, I think all of them were, yeah, at the college at that time. You know that Edith was the first African-American woman to graduate from Grinnell College. So we're talking about Africans and African-Americans who were students at the college in the 1920s and early 30s mainly. But these are people who spend time over at Edith's household. Let me ask you something else. You, at one point, I can't remember whether it was in the interview you did for the Grinnell magazine or somewhere else, you talked about playing at home, and your mother often wanted you to play close at hand and so on. What did you play, and with whom did you play?
When I was living at that house, there were always a lot of children. The Ballards, the Revises, the Cisco, they all were neighbors. And we could only play until dusk. We didn't play after dark. And we had a big yard because 411 is 150 by 150. So you know that's a big yard. So we could always play. And my mother wasn't very far away. And you know, we had plenty of garter snakes. And we loved those garter snakes. We had a great time playing hide and seek and pump pull away and all the good things.
411 First Avenue, many of you will know, if you head out to the cemetery, go down First Avenue and so on. 411 is the block just before the entrance to the cemetery. It's on the north side of the street, I think. And when you go by it, you'll still see it's a very big lot, and you can imagine the space that was available there for kids to make fun with. Did you or your friends ever go? Arbor Lake is not very far away. Did you ever go to Arbor Lake for playing or something?
We always crossed the street, went through the cow pasture, and walked to the lake. And we were always afraid that the cow would decide he wanted to look at it. I was afraid of it. I always ran real fast to get out of the path. We went to, all during the summer, we went to the lake.
It's fun to think about the cows in that part of town, isn't it? Every once in a while I hear a chicken in town, but I haven't yet run into a cow in town, but that was another time, I guess. So when you started school, you were the fifth, so your brothers and your older brother and older sisters and so on had already started school. Am I right to say that you started at Davis? Is that the right school? And do you have any recollections of Davis, either of teachers or special friends that you had at Davis?
When I went to school, I had to go to the yard of the former mayor of Grinnell, Godfrey, Mr. Godfrey. And his daughter was a good friend of mine. Her name was Hilda. And her younger brother, Ralph, was in my class. So I went by her yard every day going to school. And when we came home, her mother had the teapot on the back of the stove because they were from England. And they kept that pot always on the back of the stove. Always had a cup of tea when I went by their house. And one of the boys that was in my class was Donald Bond. And I don't know whether you remember anything about him or not, but he was on the atomic energy.
One of the pictures that I ran across, and I think your daughter helped me identify the picture of your older sister Alice when she was in school. And I think this was at South School before Davis was built. And in that picture, Alice is the only African American in that group. And I wondered, I haven't seen any other pictures of the classes from other members of your family and so on, but am I right to think that you were the only African American in your class?
Oh yeah. You know, there weren't that many of us, black people who lived in Grinnell. And the other family was the Tibbs family, but they were much, much younger than I. So consequently, no one else was in the school. And even when they went, they were only person in their classes. Because, well, my older sister and the two older sisters, they were 2 years apart. And they were in school, well, at a similar time. And my brother, who was 7 years older than I, he was sent away to Hampton Institute when he was 13 because my mother wanted him to learn a trade because only thing he could find to do in Grinnell, because you know we were poor, so we all had to do something. So he cleaned the brand apartment. That was something for him. So she said, no, that's not good. She saw to it at 13, he went away. And he never came home.
I'm going to pause just for a minute. I'm going to readjust your microphone, Edith, so that it's a little closer to your mouth. There are some baskets going around. If you've got those questions, we'll collect those, and Carla and I will try to sort some out. So be sure to add your notes there.
Maybe I should sing for a while. No? Dance? Would you like to? So, I was thinking about school again. Can you, Davis School in particular, although maybe if you want to think about some of the later schools when you went to the junior high or high school, I'm wondering whether any teacher or teachers stands out in your mind as having been particularly influential when you were at school, for you.
Well, when I was at Davis School, the 6th grade teacher was Ina Sprague. And she was very dominant, and she taught us, you must learn these poems. So every month we had to learn a poem. And she was a pretty teacher.
How many of you knew or know of Ina Sprague? Yeah, quite a few out here. Any other teacher that stands out in your mind, either for real?
When I was in high school, I took a a world geography class with Miss Bortel. Miss Bortel was the geometry and algebra teacher, but she also taught this geography class. And she told us things that we never knew about the world, about why the winter, the sun was closer to the earth. It wasn't hot because it wasn't that long. This time up was short. So I think that was
I'm wondering whether, in your school experience, many of you will know, if you read the earlier interview that Edith did, she said some remarkable things about her experience, that although there were a lot of reasons in Grinnell for a black person to be offended at various practices, from places you weren't admitted to go, Candyland, for example, refused to admit African Americans. But Edith is quite remarkable, it seems to me, in saying that she had decided that she wasn't going to pay attention to those things. Her mother, I remember this, I think I have this right, but she can correct me, her mother said what's important about people is what's on the inside and not what's on the outside, not skin color. I think that's pretty remarkable, but as I read it, and this is the question I want to ask you about, were you ever tempted to think otherwise? That is to say, somebody said something to you or did something to you and you said, well, you know, I don't think I want to overlook this. I think this is really wrong.
one of the things that my mother always taught us, that when people said ugly things, that was unimportant. Those things wouldn't hurt you. She said, what you say can snakes and stones. They hurt my bones, but what you say can hurt. And she emphasized that. And she always taught us, there's no one, they may be richer, they may be more beautiful, they may have more clothes, but you are unique. You are unique. So never forget.
And she is unique. I agree with that. Your older brothers and sisters went far away to school, college. You decided to go to Grinnell College. Why did you choose Grinnell when you might have gone to Virginia, you might have gone to Tennessee, someplace else? Why did you choose Grinnell?
One of the things, Grinnell has always been important to me. I love Grinnell. Wherever I am, I say, Grinnell is my home. So, that's why I didn't go anywhere.
Now it's going to be time for me to sing for a while. Edith moistens her voice here. She's so kind to submit to all this, and we're so grateful to do it. We don't want to put her into a difficult spot. Am I right to remember, Edith, that you lived at home when you went to college?
Yes. My mother said, I can't give you any money to go to college, but you can live at home. You have a place to stay and you go to school.
But you were still part of the, I can't remember what they call this now, but the dorm system or something. When there were parties, you were part of a one, I can't remember.
When somebody from the city went to Grinnell College, they were affiliated with either a dorm or one of the boys' places. Quadrant. And I was a member of Reed.
Do you have any Reed? A couple, yeah. You got sisters, brothers out there in school. Yeah.
One of the nicest things I remember about is when we had the Yule log.
Tell us a little bit about it. I think a lot.
Well, every year the Yule log was brought out, and we had a special service, and we relighted it and sang Christmas carols around the fireplace. It was lovely.
Any of you remember the Yule log? Yeah, we've got some people here who are part of that. See? Yeah. You're not old. It just means you remember things well. At Grinnell College, though, again, as had been true for you in high school, you were the only African-American woman, is that right? And did you find it any different from what it had been in high school? Was it better or worse? Or?
You know, one of the things that don't forget, people are people. And everyone is different. Some people are very nice, and some people are not. And consequently, if you're not nice, you let them alone.
I'm going to assume you're all the nice people. I'm just going to say that, whether it's true or not, we'll go ahead with that assumption. I want to go back to your family for a minute, your brothers and sisters, about who, by the way, I could bore you about this. They were remarkable people. Edith is a remarkable person, but what I came to learn about her older brother especially, and her older sisters even more so, quite remarkable people. I'm curious to know how you related to them. I mean, were you closest, let's say, to Helen, your oldest sister, or Alice, or did they sort of guide you through school, or were you closer to your younger brother? It's just a couple of years younger than you.
My brother and I were so close that when a person saw us, if they saw my brother first, they would say, Polly, Edith. And if they saw me first, they'd say, Edie, Polly. So we were like twins. And now, the closest sister was 6 years. That was just like being in a different family, because mother was really an empty nester when she had us, because the girls worked on a place so they could go to college. And my brother was sent away at 13, so consequently, you see, none of them were in, just the two of us were at home. And we were the biggest pests in the world. My mother said, if you children don't grow up, I'm going to go to the nut house.
How many mothers said that? I suspect so. I heard you saying yesterday, we were looking at some more photos yesterday, that Edith and her daughter, Alice Francis, who was here somewhere, I don't see where she is right now, but anyway, they went through still more photos yesterday, and a number of them were of young Edith, all with different hairdos. And we remarked on hairdos, and Edith said, well, my brother Paul always did my hair.
Yeah, that's true.
He liked to do it, and he always did her hair. And wait till you see these pictures. Monique will probably post these before too long, but I mean, you won't believe all the different really gorgeous hairstyles and so on. And Paul
He just liked to do it. And he was very adept.
Paul was the sixth and youngest, so he was about 2 years, right? About 2 years younger, year and a half younger than he is. So those are the two who were the closest. I was something like that. Maybe some of you too. I was born 6. My first 5 brothers and sisters all were close together, and so they had their own unit, and then I was a single baby, basically, right? So you two were a little bit like that. Maybe you were separate, yeah.
Because if I saw the older one, or 3 older ones, they might come home to visit on the weekend, and they wouldn't stay very long, and really, they didn't bother with them. And of course, in the very beginning, when we were very small, my sister Alice, that was her job, to take care of it. So we were the nuisances.
Now, this goes a little bit beyond 1937, but you married here, isn't that right? 1940, did you marry in Grinnell, in your house?
Our house.
Could you tell us a little bit about the wedding? Do you remember what you wore?
There wasn't much of a wedding because I was working in Chicago and we were still very, very poor. My mother's there. But, you know, I can't say we were poor because when you look and see, I never lived in an apartment. I always lived in a house. We were never hungry. So consequently, we had to be rich. And my mother said, well, you come home and get married. So I did, so we did. Got married in the living room of the house where, and if you see the picture of my mother and father's seat, that's where we got married.
Do you remember the dress that you were wearing?
Oh, I do. I got married in my first silk dress. And it was a silk trim. Oh, I I thought I was this gorgeous.
I'd like to follow up on that, but I'm not going to. I have in my hand a bunch of questions that came, and we want to try to get some of these out in case we don't want to wear you out either, so I'm going to send the first one your way. What was the price of tuition at Grinnell College when you were a student?
$125 a year. And I paid for part of it by working for an education professor. His name was Whitler. It was so cold the first winter that they said, oh, you can't walk, because I walked from the 411 to the college. They said, you can't, you have to stay with us tonight. So I did for about 3 nights.
Sounds inexpensive. Okay, here's another one also having to do with the college. How aware were you when you were a student of the impact of you graduating, being the first African-American woman to graduate from Grinnell?
No idea. Because, what does it say? It says, when you're growing up, you don't think about anybody else. You say, I'm going and I'm getting through. So you're very into me, myself, and I.
What do you think is the same or different about racism in America today?
Well, some things are better, some things are worse, and some things we don't think about.
I think she may be running for office. I stumbled into one of these presidential debates. Well, I guess this is a comment. Let me just read it to you. Maybe this will stimulate a remark on your part. But the writer says, my mother, Leona McConnell Johnston, graduated with your sister in 1924. And this was written by Darlene Johnston Baldisberger, who lives in Sealand Park now. I don't know whether you remember those persons.
Did you finish with Eva now?
Which sister? 1924, that would have been Alice, right? Is that right?
It's either Evan or Alice.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because it wasn't Helen. Because Helen finished University of Iowa in 22.
Well, yeah, I think it's not Helen. It must be either Alice or, but I don't.
Jean. It was probably Evan.
Yeah, that would.
Baltusburg.
Yeah.
But I was in school with the Baltusburger too.
Oh. Family.
Because they lived in the country.
Here's a different question. What do you remember or know about Native American communities during your childhood or during your college experience?
The only thing we knew was about the reservation up in Salem. That was the only.
Meskwaki, yeah. Here's a tough one. What is your proudest achievement?
Stay alive.
She didn't even blink. I thought that was going to be a tough one. What were some of the difficulties of growing up in a white-dominated town?
Well, who knew? One of the things is, when you had a strong mother like I had, who didn't let anything, she was indomitable. Nothing stopped her. And she wouldn't let anything stop us. And she said, do what you have to do, always. Do it. And if she sent us to do something, don't come back without it. I told you to get it. So if you have that kind of upbringing, that means that you really do whatever's necessary so your mother will, because she will get you.
I'm sure there are at least a few mothers in the audience who can sympathize. This reminds me of something I wanted to ask you about your mother. I think you talked about this, and I read more about this when I was reading about Evanel, your sister, who went on to get advanced degrees in nutrition and dietetics and so on, and taught for a number of years at several universities in the United States. But she reported, and I think you said the same thing, that your mother superintended a pretty big garden, and she did a lot of what do you call canning and putting up of vegetables and fruits. Is that right?
My father we had a catalog from Henry Field. Everything that Henry Field had in that catalog, my father tried to raise. If my father raised it, my mother can't. So you know that our cellar was always full. He put the carrots under the ground, and he put the potatoes in a wooden cart in the basement. And Mama's shelves were full of candy. And in the summer, she put the eggs down in what they called water glass. And they kept, we had eggs as long as that. And she put it in the basement. And nobody knows anything about water glass now. And we didn't have refrigeration.
Were the eggs shelled or were?
Oh no, they were just whole eggs. They were eggs, and you
In
put
their
them,
shell.
They were in their shells, and you put them down in the water glass. And then when you took them out, you just rinsed them off and cracked them and used them just like regular eggs. Well, because they were just like fresh eggs.
Salted water?
No.
Well, before we get into all the particulars, we can duke that one out later, perhaps. What? The next question reminds me of something I wanted to ask, but I have to say a couple of words of background here. One of the things that I found interesting in researching the history of the family was that Edith's mother, in 1929, had a part in a pageant that was constructed here in town to represent the 75th anniversary of the founding of Grinnell. And the part that her mother played was the part of a slave that was traveling through the Underground Railroad and had stopped off in Grinnell. And so it's, I don't know, I can't remember, 8 or 12 lines, something like that. It's not an especially big part, but it was a part that gave some sense of African Americans being part of the history of Grinnell. Although, if you read it carefully, at least this is what I thought when I read it, the last line, the woman who's being escorted out to be shepherded forward along the Underground Railroad, said something to the effect, well, you're so good to us, and that was her departing line. I wondered as I read this, and this is the question I'm going to ask you, whether you remember this pageant or not, and whether your mother had any reflections about the part that she was playing in this pageant.
I don't have any reflections, but that was one of the most exciting things for us to see our mother walk across that stage. And the stage was in what is now the 7th and 8th grade building that's what they're going to tear down. And my father worked at the Underground Railroad, which was in the Monroe Hotel, which is no more, but it was at 4th Avenue.
Right. Yes, many of you know it was right across from the depot.
And you know, that's a senior development. I mean, they have senior apartments. But that was where they had the Underground Railroad.
You may know this already. Edith referred to this earlier, but her dad was a cook. He was a chef for a long time at the Monroe Hotel. I think other places too, probably, but certainly at the Monroe Hotel, which may explain some of his interest in foods we were talking about. She said he planted all these different things in part to try them out, I'm sure, for recipes and so on, but that explains at least part of the interest. Do you have a favorite memory of 411 First Avenue?
Well, the night, my mother was a great one for going out on the west part of 411 and lying on the grass to take a nap at night because it was so hot in the house. And so this particular night, she went out and a garter snake crawled across her arm. She said, no more sleeping.
Yeah, I would feel the same way. One of the things that I think would interest people here, and I want to give you a chance to talk about this, is what you, I mean, here you are 101 years later, what would you say makes a life well lived?
First thing you have to decide is your worst. Never forget that the Lord made you perfect for you. You may not have 2 legs, you may not have 2 arms, you may have not any of those things, but God made you perfect. Just remember that. And count those blessings that God made you perfect. And He has a purpose for you in life.
I think I know why this lady has lived a long time. It's quite remarkable. We, many of you, of course, have been standing a long time. I'm not sure what I've got. I could keep you here all afternoon with questions I want to do, but I think it would be unfair to our guest and unfair to all of you, particularly who are standing all this time. You've been so kind about it. Have I collected all of if there are more, I'll do more, but otherwise I think I should read more. Did anyone call out for dinner? Okay, here's one. What's the coolest thing you've ever seen?
There's so many cool things. When I see one of these people spend so much time and money on an animal, and I see that little child walk down the street, doesn't have any shoes, and they don't even see it. That, I think that is cruel. And how can you do that?
This will respond perhaps to a lot of your interests here. The question is, what health measures did you follow to reach 101?
Well, I know you didn't have a mother that made you eat oatmeal every morning, and if she didn't have oatmeal, she had cornmeal mush. And what mush was left over, she fried for supper.
Let's hear it for mush. Do you remember any cases of your siblings, your brothers and sisters, talking about how white students treated them?
Of course, both of my brothers had a much harder time than me. And they had a lot of things happen to them, and especially my youngest brother, who was very outgoing, and he had a lot of doors slammed in his face. He overcame those two.
Well, that reminds me, I meant to ask you about this earlier. When you mentioned that, I think it was you who mentioned that you and your family were not welcome in Candyland.
Not welcome. Don't go and darken that door.
Well,
not a question of welcoming, but don't come there.
was there a sign, or did?
Oh, no, they just inserted it. No, they didn't. They wouldn't give you.
Inserted. Well, you also said that the movie theater, the Strand,
Oh,
which was...
no, they would let you go to, if you wanted to go to movies, you could go upstairs.
Would they force you upstairs, or again, there was a sign or something?
The thing is, my mother didn't let us go to the movies, so we didn't care. You know, she just said, we're not going. So, we didn't, and if you never experienced a movie, you didn't miss it because you didn't know what it was.
I think
But we didn't speak to those people either.
I think maybe they were not so nice. Well, you've spoken about this, but let me just read the question in any case. Did you feel any prejudice against you at college? or in the town in those days?
Well, we had a lot of it in the town, but I didn't pay it any mind. Because one of the things is, my mother told me, they don't want you, you go over here, you get it what you want, right here. Forget those people, they don't count. And she did it in her head. Anybody that rejects, forget them, they don't count anyway. They're very ignorant. And you know, when I was young, people said you were ignorant. Whew, that was terrible. Never be ignorant. You're supposed to know something.
We've gotten past that. It's, this is a related question. This reflects perhaps an interest of many people in the group today, but what were the barriers to being African American at Grinnell College, and how were the things the same or different when you moved to Chicago?
Well, I didn't find anything at Grinnell College that I wanted to do like that. And one of the things is those girls that at the Reed, they were all so nice, and they always begged, oh, come and do this and come and do that. So consequently, I just didn't feel it. Someone else might have felt it, but to me, if it was something, I ignored it. I ignored a lot of stuff.
That's another secret to a long life.
My daughter used to say, "Mama, did you?" I said, I don't know what happened. It had gone over my head, whatever. Because I think sometimes we internalize a lot of things that are not important.
What do you think about how aging is viewed now?
Well, they certainly are doing a lot of things for old people that they didn't used to. And if you notice, people are much kinder to help. If you need assistance, everybody, oh, I think that, can I get that? Can I help you like that? And so I think it's much better for old people. Because one of the things, we're living so long.
Well, some people I'm not sure I understand this, but I'll read it anyway. Can you tell about your visits to the farm after moving to Chicago?
One of our, barnyard relatives lived down by Europe, and they were members of the family. And whenever we had anything, or they had anything, we visited. And so when we moved to Chicago, this couple lived on the farm. They had no children. So my husband loved the farm, so he saw to it that we came out to visit. And those visits to the farm were so lovely because Alma was such a good cook, and she plucked a half a pound of butter, with mashed potatoes, and she saw to it that I always could have a quart of heavy cream to take back home. So, we missed them so much when they were no longer on the farm.
You got that right. Butter, heavy cream, and 101.
So remember, you will eat anything you want. Just don't be a pig.
I almost made it there. I was with her until she got the car step. Well, I think, if you'll agree with me, I think we've gotten very good help from our guest today. She's been absolutely a delight. I have to say for myself, I wanted to thank Monique and all the others who made it possible for me to spend this time with Edith, because it's been a pleasure, and I hope you agree with me. It's been a pleasure too. Let's join thanking our guest.